I think there's a balance between, if you go into the arts, there's somewhere between, you should be a perfectionist in some areas, and in some areas you should be a humanist. Yeah, the sort of famous Unplugged in New York with Nirvana, where I don't remember what song. But anyway, he hits the note wrong. So Kurt Cobain kind of slides up to the wrong note. It's over, and then he goes under, and it's too far under. And he's like, okay, now and he sort of centers out. I mean, it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. He eventually gets the note right, but it's a second and a half kind of too late. But that gives it heart. That's what I don't like. Perfect things. Perfect things lack humanity. There's no soul to them.
Hi everyone, I'm James, an author, editor, and the owner of The Arcanist, an independent publisher dedicated to sharing excellent fantasy fiction. This is The Morning Edit, the show where you and I sit down with a cup of coffee and talk about all things fantasy publishing, especially from the perspective of the independent author. Today I'm joined by Dr. C.D. Jensen, the author of The Crown and the Caged God, and one of my favorite people to talk to. We're having an imperfect discussion about the role of perfection in the arts, and places where you should maybe pursue perfection, and places where maybe you should let life take over and stop worrying so much. But before we begin, I wanted to remind you that my Kickstarter is coming up. My books will be live on Kickstarter very, very soon, so click the link in the description to follow the campaign so you don't miss out. Also, C.D. Jensen's new book is out, and well, I haven't dived into it yet because it's quite the chunky boy, but I've read the first one and I loved it, and I can't wait to start reading this one. If you want to check out C.D. Jensen's work, it can be a little tough because he doesn't have ebooks. I don't remember if I have a video about that, but if he does, I will have it somewhere here. And this is all to say that if you want the paper copies, which are pretty much the only way right now to read these books, I'm doing a giveaway right now. I actually have book 1 and book 2. I have extra copies. I've just kind of acquired a bit of a collection. You can see them here on my shelf. I just really like his work, and I really believe in what he does. So if you want this book, and I have a paperback of the first book, if you want them to start reading a very unique take on the fantasy genre written by a tenured professor, this is where you do it. Sign up for the giveaway in the description, and your books will be waiting for you if you're selected. All right, let's get to the talk.
When I was living in Connecticut, this study came out that, and I don't know if I'd be able to find this again, but it was about perfect music and just like snap to the grid. This was about classical music, if my recollection is not making things up. And perfect execution of it, or a little bit of error. Would the common ear be able to tell that these are errors, and maybe the timing speeds up and slows down, something like that? It's not all perfect. Probably not the common ear. The trained ear would, but the common ear, just the lay ear, people, I think they were unable to articulate why they liked this version better than that version, but it was the version that was human. As opposed to the version that was computer corrected where everything was flawless. And today, I think we're moving away from that because I think our predilections are maybe what we're comfortable with, what we grew up with, what resonates with us is experientially, in our formative years, what we decided was good. And I think those values stay with us. And so people growing up today, let's say you're 10 years old, 12 years old today, and everything is perfect and snapped to the grid and auto-tuned, and there's never a missed note. That's probably normal and maybe even emotional to people. To me, that's just cold and calculated with no heart or humanity, and there's no art in it whatsoever. But that doesn't mean I'm right. It just means that's what I value. And I think there's a lot of people who value that. You have a background in music, right?
Yeah.
And so like you play guitar.
Yeah, guitar,
okay.
bass, a couple of other things I messed with,
And so I think you probably have, it's not going to be identical, but I think you're probably going to have a similar outlook to me, where there's our Venn diagrams have more overlap than if you compare us to a 12-year-old who's just like, oh, I like, what's that, like Demon Hunter? So what's that new? Like I tried to listen to the song everyone likes, and I just found it to be an abomination to the human ear. Do you know
You're
what I'm
asking
talking
the wrong
about?
person.
Okay, it's like a K-pop song. I think it's called Demon Hunter or something like that.
Oh,
And
I think I've seen the banner on my
okay,
TV because it forced me to.
yeah, and I just keep hearing about this. I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll listen to it and see what I think. And it was just to me, and I get why it's working. I mean, it's a gimmick to people who've grown up with social media, who've grown up in scrolling culture. I'm not that person, you know? And so my sense of self, my sense of whether it's identity, purpose, self-worth, none of that is connected to like a social reputation. And that's what this song, the lyrics are such a gimmick for that. Everything is basically computerized and lacks any sort of, there's just no blood in it. You know, whatever, it's just this beating bits in the place of where a heart should be. And I just, oh man, I can't stand that stuff. I get why it's popular, and I don't think it should be eliminated from earth. You know, so it's not like because I don't like it, I think it's horrible and it needs to be eradicated. I'm not saying that. I just, that stuff doesn't connect with me. You know, if it's AI, if it's electronic, if it's what, it just doesn't connect with me. And I know there's other people too. But I think people who have maybe a music background, people who have a writing background, you know, you have both of these things. People who have a background in the arts of any kind are going to see value in heart as opposed to value in business.
I agree with that. And I'm definitely in a weird place generationally. My parents were much older than like my friends' parents were. So, and I'm the youngest of five.
Okay.
So they're all way older than me from a different generation. So I grew up with a lot of values of people who might be 5 to 10 years older than me. And I kind of came to an age where I came of age during social media and phones taking over. And I remember as a musician, that was mostly like high school for me up until like around 19 is when I fell out of it. My only experience recording in a real studio with a real engineer doing something, you know, what people would call impressive. It was this power metal band I was helping out, and I was recording a guitar part, and I'm just, it's just like a,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm doing it, you know, and the guy ended up taking the guitar from me, and he did it himself, and all he did was he had such an ear for quantization that he picked out the 4 notes he got right on cue and copy pasted all of those to match
Okay.
the fake drums.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm like, does it sound locked in? Yeah. Does it sound like a human did it? Not at all.
yeah.
Um, and that was always a struggle because the next band I was in, that was like my baby. I was hanging out. They're still my friends today, even though we haven't played music together in years. But we wrote. It was that classic like summer right before my senior year of high school. We're hanging out in the garage practicing for 12 hours and really spending like 4 of those hours smoking in the yard.
Yeah.
We would just write songs and then we'd record them, and we took over the drummer's house for a weekend, and we had a friend. It's funny to think I thought of him as like this like wizened professional, but he's like younger. He was younger than me now at the time,
Okay.
which is weird to think of how your perspective change as times go. But he brings in his big old desktop, and we set up mics throughout the entire house. We're all separated. We all have in-ear monitors, and we play our album live. And it wasn't perfect, but it rocked. It was awesome. It would have been perfect, but our singer at the time had, by perfect, I mean a perfect setup, not perfectly performed. There's tons of mess ups, but our vocalist like just didn't show up for some reason. And I had these raw recordings, and I thought like this is the coolest thing I've ever done. This is just such a good performance. It sounds exactly how I want it to sound. and I kind of did a quick mix on one of the tracks, and I put it out. And then the guy who did the recording was so mad at me. He's like, I didn't have a time to master it. I didn't have time to, like, this is my name that you've put out there, and it's just so not ready. And I'm like, what's not ready about it? It rocks. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be? Why do we have to put it through, whatever filters he wanted to do and make it sound exactly right? Like it's 2 guitars, drums, and a bass. It's not that complicated. I'm going to summon a lot of discourse, I feel like, with that statement. But it was just, I still think back on that. That was such a formative memory for me that I'll never forget that experience, because we just made something and didn't give a shit about perfection.
Yeah, I think there's a balance between, if you go into the arts, there's somewhere between, you should be a perfectionist in some areas, and in some areas you should be a humanist. Now, for me and writing, it's my sentences. I'm a perfectionist with my sentences. And I'll revise them 50 times until I decide it has the right cadence, until I decide it has the right position on the page, until I just, just all of these things. And sometimes I think people would be reading, because you probably noticed I do punctuation weird, where I'll do the comma after the quotations and stuff. But to me, that comes from the sciences of, that's not actually, that comma isn't a part of the quotation. That's lying. If you put that comma in, I get the style, I've read all the style guides and everything, but if you put that comma in the quotation, unless that comma was part of the quotation, that's a lie. And so in the sciences, I am very precise. And so the way I handle punctuation is very calculated. And it may not conform to the style guides. I know all the style guides. I publish in the natural sciences, and I have to, no matter what journal I'm submitting to, I have to reformat the paper according to journal specific standards. And so, I do 2 spaces after a period. I read faster that way because it gives me, scriptio continua used to be how language, it was just a series of letters and there's no spaces between. And how do you make sense of that? And the punctuation, the spaces just allows us, even though it gets longer, it allows us to read with faster comprehension, and whatever glossal work isn't stumbling as much. And so I deviate from some of these style guides in a way, like, I know the rules and I don't like them. Like, I don't like those rules. It's fine that everything else is written that way, but for me, there's a matter of precision. And so my control over language, I'm maniacal about. And so I think being a perfectionist in something like that, being a perfectionist, once the song is played, does it move you? In something like performative arts, where it doesn't. Do you want to meet my wife? Do you want to?
Yeah, sure.
This is Marie. This is my wife.
Hi.
Hi, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
So she's seen your face a number of times.
Yeah.
So, it's music, it's dance, it's something like that. I think the purpose is to move people. The purpose is to just, because it's not a static thing. You don't just look at a sentence. You can read over and over and over and over and over, and it exists forever. That sentence, as it's written on the page, you can hold it in your hand. A painting, something like that. Music moves. It's not static at any point. And do you move with it? Are you inspired to does your heart beat in sync with it? Are you inclined to, if it's dance music, are you inclined to dance? If it's something more somber, are your emotions, do you have some like neurochemicals that get released in conjunction with it? That's, I think, the purpose of music is really the most humane thing there is. And so, quantized, it's like snap to the grid. Everything is perfect. Taking those 4 bass notes and I don't like that. Now, granted, I've been playing guitar since I was a teenager. I'm not that good. And I'm a terrible singer. If I don't care, is the melody right? Is the melody right? And are the words right? And like that to me is what's most important. A perfect performance, I think, does more to take away from the emotion, than add to it. But again, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that's my opinion. And so I think I'm there with you where releasing it and it's like, yeah, it's emotional and it's powerful. And I get this, whether it's the chills or whatever sensation you get, perfect. I think perfectionism in other parts of the arts are important, but in that, I just don't feel like it's important. I think it was Man Who Sold that Nirvana song I had in my mind. I think it was Man Who Sold the World, so technically like a David Bowie song, but
I think you're right. Yeah.
Where it's Kurt Cobain during the solo, and he just goes up too high, down too low, and I wouldn't have it any other way, right? Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins guy, which I would say he's actually on both sides of this. He's made good points. On the perfectionism side, James Eha would come in and play parts, or Darcy Retsky would come in and play parts, and he'd just take it and re-record everything. And so I think like Siamese Dream was just him doing everything, Jimmy Chamberlain doing drums, every other note is played by Billy Corgan because he's masterful on his instruments. And so he can do it in one take. And it's going to be, perfect. And it's not like computer, modifying anything. It's just the performance is perfect. On the other side, he put out a book of poetry, Blinking with Fists. And he's like, yeah, they're not all good, but that's what a person is. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, a person is flawed. A person has moments where they shine and moments that just don't connect and whatever. And like, that's what this book of poetry is. It's a whole person. And I thought that was a brilliant way of putting it for something like poetry. I think that's brilliant. I think that's perfect. But so I think Billy Corgan has illustrated both sides in his quotations, whether those quotations live, because we all say stuff. And I don't know that anything is outright true. Whatever I say here, whatever you say here, I don't know that anything is true, like infallible but it represents an idea and those ideas ring true. And so that's, I think, the importance of quotations and what we say. People hold so tightly to these ideas of, oh, you said this and then you contradicted yourself over here, or you said this and it means that. Like, let's just all calm down and say stuff that rings true, that we feel is true, and we're being authentic, and if I change my mind a little bit, or I rephrase something, or my analogy doesn't quite map on precisely to what I said before, let's not freak out, because I think internet culture is just all about freaking out for clicks. Yeah. And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in listening to Billy Corgan talk about both of those things, perfectionism in music and imperfectionism in poetry. And there's a little nugget of truth in both of those things that you can take with you. And I think, as you and I talk, we'll find ourselves in agreement on a lot of things. We're not going to snap together perfectly on all things because we have different life. Although I don't know if you were born here, but you were raised out in my area, in like the 209 area.
Born and raised.
Raised both.
I just left a few years ago. I want to add to your discussion on truth and perfection. I think what people get held up on is the holistic idea of perfection. That perfection means no mistakes through everything at every given point, and that's just not humanity, as you pointed out with Billy Corgan. But then, so it's about the presentation, and it's about, are you meeting your goals? Does the song move you? Does this fiction that you wrote make you think about, does it challenge your beliefs? Does it make you have to consider something that maybe you didn't agree with before? Right. Does it expand your worldview? Has it been edited to the best of the editor's and the author's ability to be presented as a professional product for other people to look at? It's not about perfection. It's just about polishing this thing that you care about because it deserves to be in the best form possible. But the best form possible doesn't mean perfect. One of my favorite phrases, it's kind of a cliche, I think, at this point, but don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Don't let perfect be the enemy of done. People will, especially musicians, will pull their hair out trying to reach this perfection, but it doesn't really even exist. It's this idea that we chase after, but there is no perfect, because everything we make, as humans is imperfect, and that includes computers. You could argue that quantized music isn't perfect because it doesn't have the soul. It's lacking something. So even though it's perfect on one level, it's not on another. And moving that to the idea of truth, if perfection isn't necessarily a true thing, I really subscribe to the idea that truth is within the eye of the beholder, and that changes over time. I'm definitely not. I mean, I think your 20s is a time where you kind of zoom through ideologies and you're really starting to put the building blocks together of who you are. But when I moved to Indiana, that was a very life-altering situation I was in. I was in a bad place, and I didn't know who I was. I came to this new place to kind of find myself, and as I'm building up these things that I was certain were true when I was younger, I questioned and now have totally different beliefs about other things I've settled into, and I'm like, no, I was on the right track there, but the context around it wasn't quite there, and these things are going to change over time. As I think the worst thing we could do as critical thinkers and intellectuals is to believe that we have finished learning, because the moment you think you know everything is the moment you know nothing and cease to learn or advance.